I must admit that most of our journey through the fourth dimension was the process of visiting higher and higher frequencies of what was called mystery schools. Some of us went into the energetic patterns that we began to call mystery schools, and some of us stay at the threshold of the energy pattern to let us know if we needed to leave them. Actually, it was inside of these mystery school energy patterns that we met more beings that joined our groups. We called them humans because they had a similar form as humans, but their energy patterns were quite different from ours. We started out as a relatively small group of men and women who had not had any kind of esoteric teachings. We were just regular people who had no idea or even forewarning of what we were about to experience, but our new friends somehow expanded our consciousness. Now you might think that that would make us frightened, but our new friends gave us a constant feeling of unconditional love for all life. This feeling was so welcoming and felt so totally safe, that we totally trusted them. Therefore, we just let go into this unknown experience, and wondered if we were having some kind of group illusion. It was not until we crossed the threshold into what we called New Earth that we realized that we had actually left all illusion behind us. I will try to explain the sensation of crossing the threshold, but I am not sure I can put that experience into words. We had left a reality so filled with lies and illusions that the third-dimensional energy field had become normal. Then, when we came to threshold New Earth, our concepts of time and sequence completely disappeared from our minds. It is for this reason that I document our journey here on threshold New Earth, as I know we will likely lose all connection to third-dimensional thinking once we move beyond this threshold. Therefore, please, allow me to go back in sequence to the first sensations of our experiences of the progressive versions of New Earth. I say progressive because once we crossed the energetic threshold, we found ourselves in the next octave of New Earth. As you may see, my manner of thinking and communicating is beginning to change. I had never thought in terms of octaves of Earth, but since we crossed the threshold, that term seems very normal. In fact, it has been the same for our entire group, which somehow keeps getting larger and larger. Sometimes, we feel another human energy field join us, but other times, we just suddenly realize that our group has grown much larger. I think I might be able to explain the concept of octaves of New Earth. After we crossed the threshold, and after more beings joined us, we began to have a group inner knowing that just as there are octaves of sound, there were also octaves of form and of the space through which those forms may travel. You might think that one octave is higher or lower than the others, which they were for a while. However, once we crossed the threshold, time and space began to disappear. There was only the now in which we were here. The strangest part is that we had no problem with that total shift in our manner of perception. Somehow we were all adapted within the same now to an Earth reality that was totally different from any of the incarnations that any of us could remember. It was within that now of realization that our higher selves began to merge with our consciousness and with our ever-shifting and gracefully flowing forms. Yes, as I relive that experience I can see how we all flow like cloud beings with vaguely humanoid forms. I was told by a huge light being who identified itself as my higher self, that I was to be a reporter or a scribe. What that meant was that it would be my mission to report our journey to those who are still bound to their experience of physical Earth. Now, before I go backwards to explain each of the versions of New Earth that our group moved beyond, I want you to know that I was just a regular person on 3D Earth. I still have no idea how I was chosen to partake in this marvelous event, but I do live in constant thanksgiving for this great privilege. Therefore, before I go back to the beginning, I want to share the main thing that I learned, which is the power of gratitude. I will go into this concept more deeply later, but I want to say now that it was because our groups were able to be thankful for our experience that we could continue past the threshold and onto New Earth. You see, Gaia is a free will planet. I had no idea what that meant. However, my higher self told me that we took a body on 3D Earth to learn how to be the masters of our free will. I still do not understand how I mastered my free will, but perhaps it occurred when I chose to listen to and follow the directives of my inner voice. I must admit that the most challenging directive was to feel the inner voice. The second greatest challenge was to find the courage to share my experience with others. I doubted that I would be able to share our journey with anyone on physical Earth, but I guess that is what I am doing now. How am I able to communicate with you? I hear you asking. The answer is that just as I am to be a scribe in the fifth dimension, I was directed to be a scribe living on the third dimension. I started telling her my story many months ago in her time, but she stopped listening to me. I could tell that she was thinking that my story was perhaps something she had made up, and it was far too weird to share with others. However, I finally was able to remind her of our group's project, by reminding her that she too, as well as several of her friends, had joined us on our journey. Yes, I hear you wondering how she can write what I am sending her when she is with me. The answer to that question is that, since we passed into the fifth dimension, time and space has no meaning. We resonate to the fifth dimension, just as the galactics do. Hence, just as the galactics can communicate with humanity while using a fifth-dimensional form, we too can communicate across time and space, because to us there is no time and no space. Since we have crossed the threshold into this higher frequency of reality, all the rules of our third-dimensional reality are left behind. We have come into a frequency where there is only here and now. You note that I no longer think of me as an individual, but rather as a member of our group consciousness. We know that individuality is very important on third-dimensional Earth, and we can choose that experience in the fifth dimension if we desire. However, the feeling of unity with all life is so safe and embracing, that we seldom make that choice. You see, we do not lose anything by returning to our higher dimensional self. In fact, we regain a great deal of what we forget we lost when we entered our third-dimensional vessels. Just as you may have an antique car that you enjoy taking out of the garage for a drive, but use your modern car for daily life, we prefer to function as our fifth-dimensional self, but may eventually take a spin in our Earth vessel. But, it is the now to continue our journey. Unfortunately, we have used all the time that you may have to read our entry. Therefore, we will return when you have had enough time to read our message so far. We leave you with the message that if you feel you are drawn to our story, it is likely because you are among our ever-expanding group. Please note that I am now speaking primarily as we, rather than my once individual I. Be not concerned that you are also wearing an Earth vessel, as yourself in the fifth dimension is not limited by the third-dimensional operating system. Just as your computer adds a new operating system onto your older operating system, your unity consciousness with all life is simply added to your former programming of individuality and separation for all life. As we continue our journey into the fifth dimension, you will retain all that you have learned in all of your third-dimensional realities. You no longer have a hard drive and physical body that will become full. Instead, your new operating system is attached to the cloud, your consciousness, which is multidimensional. Can you feel how you are already feeling your other expressions of self who are sharing the illusion of time with you? All your infinite expressions of self are free within the here and now of your innate fifth-dimensional self, to take a peek into the time and space of the third dimension. Please remember that it is you who is taking a peek at you. In other words, you are observing yourself from the perspective of yourself. Once you have remembered to perceive your third-dimensional self as the grounding for your multidimensional self, you will also perceive your third-dimensional reality from a new point of view. Once you fully embrace that you are a component of the we, who took an Earth vessel during your third-dimensional time, which is our fifth-dimensional now, Your third-dimensional concept of time, space, and individuality will gradually, or quickly, return to our fifth-dimensional concept of we are here in the now. We shall return within the now to continue our story.